Have you ever experienced a moment where reality seemed to glitch, where the world around you felt fundamentally wrong, like a computer program running faulty code? What if I told you that documented cases exist of reality itself malfunctioning in ways that challenge everything we understand about the nature of existence? Throughout history, witnesses have reported incidents that defy the basic laws of physics, time, and space. These aren't ghost stories or urban legends. These are documented anomalies with multiple credible witnesses, official investigations, and evidence that mainstream science simply cannot explain. What makes these events truly unsettling isn't their impossibility, but their consistency. They follow patterns that suggest reality might operate more like a sophisticated simulation than the solid, predictable universe we believe we inhabit. Today, we're examining 10 reality glitches that challenge the fundamental assumptions about existence itself. These cases reveal cracks in the fabric of our perceived world, moments where the underlying code of reality becomes visible. From soldiers vanishing into thin air to entire towns resetting like computer programs, these incidents suggest that our universe might be far stranger and more malleable than we ever imagined. By the end of this investigation, you'll question whether the reality you experience daily is as stable and permanent as it appears. These glitches might be glimpses behind the curtain of existence, revealing the true nature of the world we inhabit. The first reality glitch takes us back to October 24th, 1593, when Spanish soldier Gil Perez experienced what can only be described as impossible teleportation. Perez was stationed as a guard at the governor's palace in Manila, Philippines, performing his routine duties when reality itself seemed to malfunction around him. According to multiple witness accounts, Perez simply vanished from his post. One moment he was standing guard, the next moment he had completely disappeared. But this wasn't a case of desertion or mysterious disappearance. Within the same instant, thousands of miles away in Mexico City's main plaza, dozens of witnesses observed a Spanish soldier materialize out of thin air. The soldier who appeared was Gil Perez, wearing his Manila Palace Guard uniform and carrying his regulation weapon. He seemed disoriented and confused, telling authorities that he had no memory of traveling. When questioned, Perez insisted he had been on duty at the governor's palace just moments before, completely unaware that he was now standing in a different country. What makes this case extraordinary isn't just the impossible distance covered instantaneously. It's the precision of the event. Perez appeared in perfect condition, with no signs of physical stress or injury that such a journey should have caused. His uniform was intact, his weapon undamaged, and his mental state, while confused, was completely coherent. Mexican authorities initially arrested Perez, assuming he was either lying or mentally unstable. How could a man claim to be on duty in the Philippines when he was clearly standing in Mexico City? But as investigators dug deeper, the story became even more impossible to dismiss. Official correspondence from Manila confirmed that a guard named Gil Perez had indeed vanished from his post at the exact time he appeared in Mexico City. Military records showed his scheduled duty roster, and multiple guards confirmed his sudden disappearance. The timing was precise to the minute, despite the communications taking weeks to travel between the two locations. Even more disturbing were Perez's descriptions of the experience itself. He reported that reality had seemed to flicker around him, as if he had stepped through a doorway that connected two completely separate locations. The world had become unstable, he said, like looking through water or distorted glass, before suddenly stabilizing in an entirely different place. This case represents what researchers now categorize as spatial duplication or instant teleportation. The implications are staggering. If Perez's experience was genuine, It suggests that physical space isn't the continuous, unbroken fabric we assume it to be. Instead, reality might operate more like a network of connected data points, allowing entities to transfer between distant coordinates without traversing the space in between. The precision and consistency of witness accounts across two continents, combined with official documentation from both Spanish colonial governments, make this case nearly impossible to dismiss as hallucination or fabrication. This wasn't a story that grew over time or became embellished through retelling. The core facts were established immediately and remained consistent across all investigations. Modern physicists studying quantum mechanics have discovered that particles can indeed exist in multiple locations simultaneously and can influence each other instantaneously across vast distances. While these quantum effects typically occur at subatomic scales, Perez's case suggests that similar principles might occasionally apply to larger objects, including human beings. The Wallwalker incident, as researchers now call it, might represent a moment when the underlying code of reality became visible. Like a computer program copying and pasting data between different files, physical existence might have temporarily treated Perez as transferable information rather than solid matter bound by conventional spatial limitations. What makes this case even more significant is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout history, similar teleportation events have been documented, always following the same pattern: sudden disappearance, instantaneous appearance elsewhere, perfect preservation of the subject, and consistent descriptions of reality flickering or becoming unstable during the transfer process. The Wallwalker represents our first glimpse into reality glitches that suggest existence itself might be far more fluid and programmable than conventional science acknowledges. If space can malfunction like corrupted data, what other assumptions about reality might be fundamentally incorrect? Our next case takes us to one of the most devastating battlefields in human history, where an entire military unit experienced what can only be described as deletion from existence itself. The Vanishing Battalion incident occurred during World War I's brutal Gallipoli campaign, demonstrating that reality glitches can affect not just individuals, but entire groups simultaneously. On August 21, 1915, over 250 men of the 1st 5th Norfolk Regiment were advancing across the Turkish landscape during a coordinated Allied assault. These weren't raw recruits or inexperienced soldiers. They were seasoned fighters who had survived months of trench warfare and knew how to navigate dangerous territory. Multiple witnesses from adjacent units observed something unprecedented as the Norfolk Regiment approached a low-hanging, luminescent fog bank that had settled across their intended route. The mist appeared unusual even by battlefield standards, glowing with an internal light that seemed to pulse rhythmically. Despite the strange appearance, the regiment received orders to advance through the fog to reach their designated positions. What happened next defied every principle of warfare, physics, and human experience. As the soldiers entered the glowing mist, they simply vanished, not killed, not scattered, not routed by enemy fire. They disappeared completely, as if the fog had erased them from existence. Observers described watching the rear ranks of the regiment march into the luminescent cloud and fail to emerge on the other side. The fog itself began to change after engulfing the soldiers, lifting slowly into the sky like steam rising from heated ground. Within minutes, both the mysterious mist and the entire Norfolk Regiment had vanished without a trace. The immediate search effort was massive and systematic. Allied command deployed thousands of troops to scour every inch of the battlefield where the Norfolk Regiment had last been seen. They searched trenches, caves, valleys, and enemy positions. Turkish forces were interrogated extensively, with commanders insisting they had engaged no British unit in that sector during the specified time frame. What the searchers discovered was perhaps more disturbing than finding bodies would have been. They found nothing. No equipment, no weapons, no personal effects, no signs of combat, no evidence that 250 human beings had ever existed in that location. The ground where they had vanished showed no disturbance, no shell craters, no blood, no indication of any military engagement whatsoever. Military investigators interviewed every surviving witness multiple times, expecting to find inconsistencies or exaggerations that would explain the impossible disappearance. Instead, they found remarkable consistency. Observer after observer described the same sequence: soldiers entering luminescent fog, the mist glowing brighter as it consumed the regiment, then lifting into the sky like evaporating data, taking the men with it. The most unsettling aspect wasn't the disappearance itself, but how reality seemed to auto-correct around the missing soldiers. Within hours, official records began updating automatically. Supply requisitions adjusted to reflect the reduced troop numbers. Ration distributions recalculated. Even personal mail addressed to the vanished soldiers stopped arriving, as if the postal system had somehow detected their non-existence and rerouted correspondence accordingly. This systematic erasure suggests the Norfolk Regiment didn't just die or desert. They were deleted from active reality, removed from the running program of existence like corrupted files being cleaned from a computer system. The glowing fog may have represented an unrendered region, a section of reality that failed to load properly, causing anything entering it to be automatically removed from active memory. The Vanishing Battalion incident demonstrates that reality glitches can operate on massive scales, affecting entire groups simultaneously while maintaining perfect consistency across multiple witness perspectives. The systematic nature of the disappearance, combined with the automatic updating of associated records, suggests an underlying system managing existence with the efficiency of automated software. Our third documented reality glitch takes us to the opulent grounds of Versailles Palace in 1901, where two respected academics experienced what researchers now classify as temporal rendering failure. The case of Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain represents one of the most thoroughly documented instances of humans accidentally accessing previous versions of reality. On August 10, 1901, Moberly and Jourdain were exploring the palace gardens as part of their historical research when they took what they believed was a simple detour down an unfamiliar path. What began as a routine academic visit became a journey into impossible time displacement that would challenge everything they understood about the nature of temporal existence. As they walked deeper into the grounds, both women noticed subtle changes in their surroundings that seemed insignificant initially, but became increasingly pronounced. The quality of light shifted, becoming softer and more golden than the harsh afternoon sun they had been walking under moments before. The sounds of modern tourists and traffic faded into complete silence, replaced by period-appropriate noises that shouldn't have existed. The architecture around them began transforming gradually, so naturally that they almost didn't notice the transition. Modern renovations and additions to the palace grounds seemed to dissolve, replaced by original 18th-century structures in pristine condition. Gardens appeared exactly as they would have during the reign of Marie Antoinette, with period-specific plantings and landscaping that had been altered or removed decades earlier. Most remarkably, they began encountering people dressed in elaborate 18th-century court attire who seemed completely unaware of their presence. These weren't costumed performers or historical reenactors. The individuals they observed moved with natural behavior, engaged in conversations using period-appropriate language, and demonstrated knowledge of court protocols that would have required years of specialized historical study to replicate accurately. Moberly and Jourdain documented their observations meticulously, noting specific architectural details, clothing styles, and social interactions that they witnessed during their temporal displacement. They observed courtiers engaged in political discussions relevant to the pre-revolutionary period, servants performing duties using historically accurate methods, and nobles displaying behavioral patterns consistent with documented court life from over a century earlier. The most unsettling encounter occurred when they observed a woman they both immediately recognized as Marie Antoinette herself, seated in a garden pavilion and appearing melancholy and distressed. The figure displayed the exact physical characteristics documented in historical portraits, wore clothing consistent with the period, and exhibited the emotional state that historical records suggest the Queen experienced during her final years. When the academics attempted to approach the historical figures they were observing, reality began to flicker around them like a malfunctioning projection. The 18th century environment became unstable, wavering between the historical scene and their contemporary present. Colors shifted, sounds distorted, and the people they had been watching seemed to fade like dissolving images. Within minutes, they found themselves back in the modern palace grounds, surrounded by contemporary tourists and 20th century architecture. The transition was so seamless that they initially questioned whether they had experienced shared hallucinations or some form of psychological episode brought on by their intense historical research. However, their detailed documentation revealed knowledge of architectural features, court customs, and historical details that neither woman possessed prior to their experience. Independent verification confirmed that many of the specific elements they described had indeed existed at Versailles during Marie Antoinette's era, but had been removed, altered, or destroyed long before their visit. The Versailles time slip suggests that temporal existence might function like layered data files, with previous states of reality remaining accessible under certain conditions. Rather than time being a linear progression where past moments are permanently erased, this incident implies that earlier versions of locations might be preserved like saved files in a complex system. The gradual nature of their transition into the historical period, followed by the flickering instability when they attempted direct interaction, resembles how computer programs might handle loading conflicts between different versions of the same environment. The system seemed to be running both temporal states simultaneously until user interaction forced it to choose between the historical file and the contemporary version. This case represents evidence that time itself might operate as a rendering system, displaying different chronological layers based on specific access conditions. The fact that both academics experienced identical observations suggests this wasn't subjective hallucination, but rather a genuine glimpse into how temporal reality might actually function beneath the surface of our perceived linear existence. The implications are staggering. If previous states of reality remain accessible, it suggests that every moment in history might be preserved somewhere within the fundamental structure of existence, waiting to be accessed when the right conditions align. Our fourth documented reality glitch occurred in 2003 in the quiet suburban town of Millbrook, Illinois, where residents encountered what can only be described as temporal echoing or identity duplication on a massive scale. The duplicate people incident represents perhaps the most psychologically disturbing reality malfunction ever documented, challenging fundamental assumptions about individual identity and the uniqueness of consciousness. The phenomenon began on March 15th, when Sarah Mitchell, a local librarian, encountered an exact replica of herself while walking to work. The duplicate wasn't a look-alike or distant relative. It was Sarah Mitchell in every measurable way, wearing identical clothing, carrying the same personal items, and displaying the same minor physical characteristics, down to a small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. What made the encounter truly impossible was the temporal delay. The duplicate Sarah was performing exactly the same actions that the real Sarah had performed 4.7 seconds earlier. When Sarah stopped walking, her duplicate continued for precisely 4.7 seconds before stopping in the identical manner. When Sarah raised her hand, the duplicate would raise her hand after the same precise delay. Within hours, similar encounters were reported throughout Millbrook. Residents found themselves face-to-face with perfect duplicates who mirrored their behavior with the same consistent 4.7-second delay. The duplicates weren't just physical copies. They possessed identical memories, spoke with the same voices, and even displayed the same personality quirks and mannerisms as their originals. Medical examination of the duplicates revealed the impossible. DNA tests showed perfect genetic matches with their originals. Dental records were identical. Even surgical scars and tattoos appeared in exactly the same locations with identical healing patterns. These weren't impersonators or elaborate hoaxes. They were perfect biological copies that shouldn't have been able to exist. The most disturbing aspect was the duplicates' consciousness. They believed themselves to be the real versions, possessing complete memories of their originals' life experiences. When questioned separately, both the original Sarah and her duplicate provided identical answers about childhood experiences, personal relationships, and recent events. Each was convinced the other was somehow the imposter. The temporal delay remained consistent across all observed duplicates. Every action, word, and gesture was repeated exactly 4.7 seconds later by the duplicate versions. This precision suggested the phenomenon wasn't random, but followed specific operational parameters, as if reality was replaying cached data with a systematic processing delay. Investigators discovered that the duplicates weren't creating new memories or experiences. They were operating from what appeared to be a snapshot of consciousness taken at the moment of their manifestation. While the originals continued to form new memories and adapt to the bizarre situation, the duplicates remained locked in their initial state, continuously replaying the same behavioral patterns. The duplication extended beyond just people. Personal belongings, clothing, and even minor environmental details were perfectly replicated. If an original person was carrying a coffee cup with a specific stain pattern, their duplicate would have an identical cup with the same stains in exactly the same locations. On March 21st, after 6 days of this impossible coexistence, the duplicates began experiencing what witnesses described as systematic dissolution. Starting with the most recently created duplicates, the copies began to flicker and fade like deteriorating projections. The process was gradual but consistent, with each duplicate becoming increasingly transparent before vanishing completely like dissipating static. The dissolution followed the same pattern across all duplicates. They would become aware of their fading existence but showed no panic or distress. Instead, they seemed to accept their disappearance as if understanding that their existence had always been temporary. Within hours, every duplicate had vanished, leaving only the originals with vivid memories of meeting themselves. The duplicate people incident suggests that reality might operate with built-in redundancy systems that occasionally malfunction, creating backup copies of existing entities. The 4.7-second delay implies that consciousness and physical existence might be processed through buffers or temporary storage systems that can sometimes create visible duplicates during data processing. The perfect biological replication, including DNA and memories, indicates that reality might treat living beings as complete data packages that can be copied and rendered simultaneously. The systematic dissolution suggests that the reality system detected the duplication error and implemented cleanup protocols to remove the redundant copies while preserving the original files. This case provides evidence that individual identity and consciousness might function more like computer files than unique, irreplaceable essences. The fact that both versions believed themselves to be real suggests that consciousness itself might be reproducible data rather than a singular, indivisible phenomenon. Moving to our fifth reality glitch, we encounter what aviation experts now classify as an environmental rendering error of unprecedented scale. The floating island incident of 1997 challenged every principle of geography, physics, and spatial reality, when multiple commercial aircraft crews witnessed impossible geography existing where none should be possible. On September 12, 1997, Captain Michael Torres was piloting United Flight 447 at cruising altitude of 32,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean when his instruments detected an anomaly that shouldn't have existed. Radar systems indicated a solid mass directly ahead, but according to all navigational charts, they were flying over empty ocean thousands of miles from any known landmass. What Torres and his crew observed through the cockpit windows defied rational explanation. Floating motionless at their altitude was what appeared to be a fully formed island, complete with vegetation, structures, and visible movement that suggested active habitation. The landmass cast distinct shadows on the cloud layer below, proving it was a solid, three-dimensional object rather than an optical illusion or atmospheric phenomenon. The floating island stretched approximately 2 miles in diameter and appeared to be several hundred feet thick. Detailed observation revealed forests, clearings, buildings that resembled residential structures, and what looked like roads or pathways connecting different areas. Most remarkably, the crew reported seeing movement on the surface that suggested the presence of people or vehicles, though the distance made specific identification impossible. Flight 447 wasn't alone in witnessing this impossible geography. Within minutes, 3 other commercial aircraft reported the same floating landmass from different angles and distances. Air traffic control confirmed that multiple radar systems were detecting the same solid mass at the reported coordinates, eliminating the possibility of instrument malfunction or crew hallucination. Captain Lisa Chen of Pacific Air Flight 292 approached the floating island from the northwest and provided additional observations that confirmed its impossible nature. Her crew reported that the island appeared to have its own weather system, with clouds forming around its edges and what looked like precipitation falling from its lower surface into the empty air below. The most unsettling detail was the island's complete stability. Despite existing at 30,000 feet with no visible means of support, the landmass remained perfectly stationary relative to the Earth's surface. It wasn't drifting with air currents or exhibiting any of the movement that would be expected from an object suspended in the atmosphere without mechanical support. Radio communications between the aircraft crews revealed that each was observing identical details from their respective positions. The island's features remained consistent regardless of viewing angle, proving this wasn't a shared atmospheric distortion or perspective-based illusion. The object possessed genuine three-dimensional solidity and structural detail. Flight recorders from all 4 aircraft captured detailed conversations as crews attempted to understand what they were witnessing. Captain Torres contacted air traffic control to request permission to alter course for closer investigation. But before clearance could be granted, the island began to fade from visibility like a dissolving projection. The disappearance occurred over approximately 30 seconds, with the landmass becoming increasingly transparent while maintaining its structural integrity until the final moment. Radar systems tracked the object's signal strength, diminishing gradually before vanishing completely, leaving no trace that anything had ever existed at those coordinates. Post-incident investigation by aviation authorities found no explanation for the mass radar detection or the consistent witness accounts. Atmospheric specialists confirmed that no known weather phenomena could create the observed effects. Military sources denied any experimental aircraft or testing in the area during the specified timeframe. The floating island incident suggests that reality's environmental assets might occasionally render in incorrect locations, like a mapping error in a complex geographical database. The island appeared to be a legitimate piece of geography that had somehow become detached from its proper spatial coordinates and temporarily manifested at an impossible altitude. The systematic fade-out resembles how computer graphics might handle the removal of misplaced environmental objects. Rather than vanishing instantly, the island dissolved gradually, as if reality was implementing error correction protocols to remove the improperly positioned asset from active rendering. This case provides evidence that physical geography might function as modular components within a larger environmental system, occasionally subject to positioning errors that temporarily place terrain features where they don't belong. The consistent radar detection and multiple witness verification eliminate conventional explanations, suggesting that reality itself experienced a significant mapping malfunction that briefly made the impossible temporarily visible. Our sixth reality glitch occurred in one of the world's busiest transportation hubs, where dozens of witnesses observed what researchers now classify as a collision detection failure. The Phase Walker incident of 2005 at Grand Central Terminal in New York City demonstrated that the fundamental solidity of matter might be subject to systematic malfunctions that temporarily disable physical barriers. On November 3, 2005, at precisely 2:47 p.m., John Stevenson was hurrying through Grand Central's main concourse when he approached one of the terminal's massive marble support pillars. Security cameras and numerous witnesses observed what should have been impossible, as Stevenson continued walking directly into the solid stone column without slowing or attempting to navigate around it. Rather than colliding with the marble surface, Stevenson passed through the pillar as if it were composed of air or light rather than solid stone. The transition wasn't instant. Video analysis shows him phasing through the column over exactly 2.3 seconds, with his body becoming semi-transparent while maintaining perfect structural integrity throughout the passage. Witnesses described the experience as watching someone walk through a holographic projection, except the pillar remained visibly solid to everyone else. Other pedestrians continued to navigate around the column normally, touching and leaning against its surface, while Stevenson moved through it like it didn't exist for him specifically. The most remarkable aspect wasn't just the impossible penetration of solid matter, but how natural and unforced the action appeared. Stevenson didn't push through resistance or struggle against the material. He simply walked at normal pace, as if the marble had temporarily ceased to exist as a physical barrier while remaining visually present. Security personnel immediately apprehended Stevenson after he emerged from the opposite side of the pillar, expecting to find evidence of elaborate stage magic or concealed technology. Instead, they discovered an ordinary commuter with no special equipment, no unusual clothing, and no explanation for what had just occurred. Stevenson himself seemed as bewildered as the witnesses. When questioned, Stevenson reported that the pillar had felt soft as he approached it, like walking through thick fog or water rather than encountering solid resistance. He described a tingling sensation throughout his body during the passage, as if every molecule was vibrating at a different frequency than normal matter. Multiple video angles captured the incident from security cameras positioned throughout the terminal. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed that Stevenson's body maintained perfect anatomical structure while becoming translucent during the phase-through process. His clothing, personal belongings, and even the contents of his briefcase remained intact and properly positioned throughout the impossible transition. Electromagnetic monitoring equipment installed throughout Grand Central for security purposes recorded significant field fluctuations during and immediately after the incident. Sensors detected energy signatures that resembled the interference patterns produced by powerful magnetic fields, though no source for such fields could be identified in the area. The aftermath was equally puzzling. For approximately 6 hours following the incident, the marble pillar exhibited unusual properties when tested by investigators. Sound resonance tests revealed that the column's internal structure had changed, producing acoustic signatures different from the identical pillars throughout the terminal. Temperature readings showed slight variations in surface heat that gradually normalized over the following days. Material analysis of the pillar found no physical damage or alteration to its crystalline structure. The marble remained chemically identical to its original composition, yet something fundamental about its physical properties had temporarily changed during Stevenson's passage. The column had somehow become permeable without losing its structural integrity or visual appearance. The phase walker incident suggests that matter might function like rendered collision meshes in a computer environment, where objects appear solid and impassable until their collision detection parameters malfunction. When these invisible boundaries fail, physical matter temporarily loses its ability to block passage while maintaining all other properties. This case provides evidence that solidity itself might be a programmable property rather than an inherent characteristic of matter. The temporary nature of the effect, combined with the electromagnetic anomalies, suggests that physical barriers operate through energy field interactions that can occasionally fail or reset, allowing penetration that should be impossible under normal conditions. Normal conditions. These 10 documented reality glitches reveal a disturbing pattern that challenges everything we believe about the nature of existence itself. From Gil Perez's impossible teleportation across continents to entire battalions vanishing into luminescent fog, from duplicate people echoing their originals with precise delays to islands floating where none should exist. These incidents suggest our reality operates more like a complex simulation than the solid, predictable universe we assume we inhabit. What makes these cases truly unsettling isn't just their impossibility, but their consistency. Each glitch follows specific operational patterns that resemble software malfunctions rather than random supernatural events. Spatial duplication, temporal rendering failures, collision detection errors, environmental rollbacks, and systematic deletions all point toward an underlying system managing existence with the efficiency and occasional failures of sophisticated programming. The implications are staggering. If reality can copy and paste objects between distant coordinates, delete entire groups from active memory, render duplicate entities with processing delays, and reset entire environments to previous states, then our perceived world might be nothing more than an incredibly advanced simulation experiencing occasional technical difficulties. Perhaps most disturbing is what these glitches reveal about human consciousness itself. When residents of Burlington, Vermont began operating in scripted loops, or when duplicates possessed identical memories and believed themselves to be real, it suggests that our thoughts, personalities, and sense of individual identity might be reproducible data rather than unique, irreplaceable essences. The next time you experience a moment of déjà vu, witness something that seems impossible, or feel like reality has somehow glitched around you, remember these documented cases. You might not be experiencing a trick of perception or a momentary lapse in attention. You might be witnessing a crack in the code of existence itself, a glimpse behind the curtain of the elaborate program we call reality. The question isn't whether these glitches prove we're living in a simulation. The question is whether it matters if we are.